This is Math 2, Unit 11, Lesson 4. You should have out your notebooks. Go ahead and you should have your packet out as well, and your calculators. So notebooks, packets, calculators. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This is 11.4. Quadratic formula in mid-unit review. Quadratic formula is what I'm going to put as the title. Quadratic formula. And then the date. Okay. Number 1. Before I write it down, I'm going to put solve using the quadratic formula. Solve. I'm just going to write solve since we're doing it in this section. I want you to always use the quadratic formula in the section. On the homework, when it isn't, or on, not homework, the test or the quiz, if it doesn't specify which form to use, you can pick quadratic formula or complete the square. If it's specific and it says solve using the quadratic formula like it will today, then you have to use this form, and that's the work I will look for. Leave answers in simplified radical form. Or complex numbers as well, because we will end up with some complex numbers. Okay. So, before we get started, I just want to remind you or let you know that quadratic formula is just another way to solve quadratic equations. Remember, what is a quadratic equation? I am going to white out the word solve. You can scribble it if you wrote it in pen. Okay, quadratic equation versus the quadratic formula. Okay, quadratic equation is what we've been used to. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. That's when it's in standard form, and you want it in standard form when you're using quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. If you look it up tonight, how to sing the quadratic formula, you'll find a ton of videos of people singing songs with the quadratic formula. All right, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You will need to have that formula memorized. Not for Friday's quiz, but for the quiz number 2, which is next Friday, and you will also need it for the test. So not for this Friday's quiz, but the following quiz next week, as well as the test, you'll need to have that memorized. Okay. Whew. We're going to, and why do we use this? Because not all problems are factorable. So when they're not factorable, we can now complete the square or use quadratic formula. Even the ones that are factorable, you can use quadratic formula and it will always work. Some people like this because it works all the time. It's opinion. All right, solve using quadratic formula. Solve using the quadratic formula. Solve using the quadratic formula. Okay, number 1, x squared plus 8x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, first off, it needs to be in standard form, and it has to equal 0. So a few things. If it doesn't equal 0, move things around so that it does equal 0. Okay, so what you're going to do is label your A, your B, and your C. I'm going to do that over here. A equals, B equals, C equals. A is your leading coefficient in front of your x squared. Do you see that? And it's 1. B is the coefficient of x, that's positive 8. And C is your constant, negative 3. Okay, we're going to use that. X equals opposite B, I'm going to write like this, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, I just put a bunch of blanks, and you will have one like this on the test where there's a bunch of blanks and you have to fill it in with the correct numbers. Okay, opposite B, so that's opposite 8, and then 8 squared minus 4a, and I know it's 4a because it's 4ac. A is 1, c is negative 3, all over 2a, a is 1. So that's what it looks like there. Okay, x equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 3 is positive 12. All over 2. Now, one thing you cannot do is reduce these two. You cannot, because the negative 8 is being plus or minus this number here, so you cannot. Do not, as tempting as it is, do not reduce that. I'll show you and tell you when you can or when you cannot. Right now, you cannot. Okay, negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 plus 12 is 76 over 2. All right, now we have to break up the 76. 76, not 26. 76 is not a perfect squared, but we're going to see if any pairs come out. So you have your calculators out. At least it divides by 2. 2 and 38. 38 is even, so divide that by 2. 2 and 19. Can you guys see that the 2's are going to come out as a pair, leaving the 19 inside? That is negative 8 plus or minus 2 root 19 over 2. Now you can only reduce if you can find a number that goes into the negative 8, the 2, and the denominator. The radical, it doesn't have to divide into the radical as long as it divides into the coefficient of the radical. The number in front of the radical is a 2. This is negative 8, and that's 2. You can divide them all by a 2. Divide all of those numbers by a 2. Let's say this top number here was 3 root 19. You would not be able to reduce. Okay, so negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 root 19 is just root 19. All over 2 divided by 2 is 1. You do not need the negative 1 or positive 1 in the denominator, so this here is your final answer. I'm not going to do it today, but maybe on Friday I will do the same one with completing the square. Add the 3 plus blank on each side. You can actually try that on your own later today and see if you get the same answer. And it should work out the same in the end. And then you can decide which method you like better. Okay, number 2. Two x squared equals 7x plus 1. Okay, now when you have, what I said earlier is if you're using quadratic formula, it has to equal 0. If it does not equal 0, you need to move things around so that it does equal 0. So it doesn't, on this one, it doesn't matter if your ax squared is positive or negative. I like to leave it positive, so I'm just going to subtract and subtract. Gone and gone. Notice the 7x and the negative 1 are not like terms with the 2x squared. None of these terms are like terms. Standard form, because it has to be in standard form, 2x squared minus 7x minus 1 equals 0. 2x squared minus 7x minus 1 equals 0. Does everyone see how that works? Okay, so A is 2, B is negative 7, and C is negative 1. 2, negative 7, negative 1. And I want to see this written down in every problem, so I want to make sure that you guys are doing them correctly. All right, x equals negative b, so negative parentheses, plus or minus the square root of b squared is blank squared, minus 4ac, 4 blank blank, all over 2a, 2 blank. And we're just going to fill everything in. b is -7. B squared is another -7, but now it's squared. 4ac, ac is 2 and -1, all over 2a, 2 times 2. And you do have, again, one like this in the test, and this is exactly how you would write it. Opposite of -7, and then -7 squared, and then 4, 2, -1, 2, and 2, and you would stop there. And then the next question will say, simplify and work it out. Okay, opposite of -7 is +7. Plus or minus, does everybody see that? Two negatives make the positive. Positive 49, because when you square a negative, it is positive. 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. And a negative times a negative makes it a positive. 49 plus 8. All over 4. 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 8 is 57 over 4. 57 is not a perfect square, so try to break it down. 57, it does divide by 3. 57 divided by 3 is 19. And no pairs come out. They're both 3 and 19 are both prime, so this is your answer. X equals 7 plus or minus root 57 divided by 4. Those are two solutions, 7 plus root 57 over 4 and 7 minus root 57 over 4. Those are two solutions. Same thing over here, x equals -4 plus root 19 and -4 minus root 19. There's two solutions. All right, what I want you to do quickly is put these notes aside and take back out your packet. And open up your packet to worksheet 4. Okay, I just want to do 2 of them with you quickly and then give you the rest of the time to work. Okay, let's go ahead and do, let's do number 6. Oh, and one correction, I'm glad I remembered. Number 7, there's a typo. P squared P, that should be a P. 2P, not 2X. We don't ever work these out with different variables. All P's or all X's or all Y's or all K's. So please fix that typo. All right. I said I would do 6. Remember, it has to equal 0. So I'm going to subtract the 2m. This one does have a like term, so put it here. Gone. 2m squared, -3m and -2m is -5m plus 1. Okay, 2m squared, -3, -2 is -5m, and then +1 stayed +m equals 0 because those two undo each other. Okay, actually write that over here. A equals 2, B equals -5, and C equals +1. 2, -5, 1. X equals -b, put parentheses, plus or minus the square root of, blank squared minus 4 blank blank, all over 2 blank. And you want to make sure that you know the formula. So you can have your notes out still so you know what goes where. Okay, if there's not enough room for you to work on this paper, you may want to do it on a separate piece of paper because it looks like it's going to be a little tight. I'm going to continue the best I can. Opposite B, B is -5, so opposite of -5, do you guys see how that worked? And then -5 squared minus 4a, 4a is 2, times c is 1, all over 2 times 2 because it is 2a. Okay, x equals +5 plus or minus the square root of 25. 4 times 2 is 4 times 1 is 4, and it's -4 because there's only one negative and the rest are positive. So that is a negative 4 all over, and I have run out of room. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, I am going to have to do a separate piece of paper. You continue, and I get 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 4 is 21 all over 4. 21 is not prime. Break it down. What does that break down to? 7 and 3, both are prime. Nothing comes out, so this here is your final answer. 5 plus or minus the square root of 21 all over 4. So I didn't need the extra piece of paper on that one. 5 plus or minus root 21 all over 4. Okay, last one I'm going to do with you is number 10, and then you have the rest of the time to work on your own. Number 10 is 2x squared plus 4x plus 5 equals 0. It already equals 0 the way it should. We said it should equal 0, and it does. So don't forget, I want to see that in every problem. A equals 2, B equals 4, C equals 5. X equals negative B, I put a blank, plus or minus the square root of blank squared minus 4 blank blank all over 2 blank. What goes in the first blank? Look back at your formula. That is negative B. What I'm doing is I'm just putting parentheses around all of my letters, so it looks like this. What goes in the first blank? Whatever B is, and B is 4. The next blank is another B, and we're squaring it. Tristan. Okay, and then you do 4 squared minus 4 times A times C, so 2, 5. All right, sorry, 2 times 5 because that's A and C, all over 2 times 2 because A is 2. Okay, so then we continue, and that gives me negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. I would do 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10, times 4 is 40, and it is minus because there's only one negative. If that had been a negative 5, then I would multiply and it become positive. But since there's only one negative, no other negative here, it's going to stay negative. All over 4. Remember what I said, you cannot reduce those because they are not reducible yet until you get a coefficient here. Okay, negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, plug it in your calculator, do it by hand, do it in your head. 16 minus 40 equals negative 39. Try it again. 16, take away 40. Okay, somehow I messed up, and that is way off, and I apologize. I got sidetracked on my work. 16 minus 40 is negative 24, which looks much better. Okay. Again, 16 minus 40 is negative 24, 2, 3, okay, over 4. I still cannot reduce those numbers because I have to simplify this first. And I am running out of room really fast here. 24, break it down. What is that? 4 and 6, 2 and 2, 2 and 3. Can you guys see that the 2 is going to come out as 2 and the 2, 3 is going to stay in as 6? So that gives me, let's see, negative 4 plus or minus. Now because it's negative, an I is also going to come out. So that 2, an I, and a root 6 stays in, all over 4. Now before I reduce, negative 4 stayed negative 4. The square root of negative 24 became 2i root 6. We did that yesterday. Where am I getting the 2i from? 24 breaks down into 2, 2, 2, 3. This 2 comes out. That 6 stays in. The I is because it's negative. So 2i root 6 all over 4. and you can only reduce if you find a number that goes into all three. Even though there's an I and a radical, I can still reduce. As long as I can find a number that goes into 2, 4, and -4. All right, so I can divide everything by 2. And what does that give me? -4 divided by 2 is -2, plus or minus. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that's just I root 6. And then 4 divided by 2 is 2, and that there is your final answer. -2 plus or minus I root 6 over 2. All right. Really quick, I'm going to have you guys continue, but I just want to throw one problem, not a problem, but a what if, just really quick. You just have to pay attention. What if you ended up doing all your quadratic and you ended up with this at the end? 6 plus or minus 5 root 2 over 6. Okay, so let's just pretend you did all your quadratic. Let's pretend it was this one. You did all your work and you got to this at the end. As tempting as it is to reduce these two, you do not. You do not, because again, you have to find a number that goes into all three. Ignore the radical for now. 6, 5, and 6. Nothing other than 1 divides into 6, 5, and 6. So this here would be your answer. You could not go any further. There is no reducing. Why did we reduce on this one? Because -4, 2, and 4 all divide by 2. Make sense? Okay, that is it for this lesson. Get to work on the rest of the worksheet and you finish it up as you go, and you can check answers with mine as you go. Oh, and don't forget, you also have the back side. You do have the mid-review worksheet on the back as well to do. All of that is review from previous lessons. Okay, get to work.